I'm from Venezuela. Okay, I'm from Venezuela. Okay, let's be nice. How many people is there under communist government, like with the Marxism? We're going to forget about. Oh, really?
What happened for you, brother?
Why are you interviewing me?
You don't know what
Do it.
said?
Do it. Yes.
You're fighting for something that you don't have an answer?
You can argument.
Yeah.
You have no idea what are you promoting.
You see how you smart? How you educated? You don't know
What
nothing.
is it? You can argue.
You don't have an agree.
I can't educate to promote communism. I will never defend those.
So what should we do? Should we?
I have political prisoners in my country. I have to advocate for them, and they are tortured.
And what about capitalism?
Killing.
I asked you about capitalism.
Yeah.
What about it?
You are in a capitalist country.
And it's shit.
What are you doing here? Why you don't move to Russia?
I was born
Why
here.
you gonna move to Cuba?
Russia is not communist.
Because you will not turn Canada in a communist country if you want to try that. That is not going to happen. People like us is not going to allow that.
The revolution
if you
is inevitable.
Really want, what's revolution?
The revolution is inevitable, but success
yeah,
is
everyone
not.
is equal
We must
down.
build the party that will
Guys,
lead the workers to
learn,
success.
start. You have no idea what are you talking about. You cannot agree with, you cannot support anything with a political prisoner who was.
Wait for the punchline.
Miss, with all due respect, I can do what I please.
You understand? And that regime support communism and Marxism. This is assassination, killing people, totalitarian. No freedom is what communism promotes.
I think he's young. He's 18. He's latched onto this.
No.
I think he's dumb, but I just want to highlight what all of you know that I was looking at in this entire video the entire time. Look at that beautiful dog in the background. Where is he? Where is he? Look at that thing. Oh, and he's just stretching. And oh, well, we can't see him there anyway. It was more in the beginning when we see him. Look at that beautiful dog. There are a couple of highlights in this video. There's two highlights. And if I go to the chat and I, ask what the highlights were, you might get them, but we don't have all the time in the world today. One highlight, which I particularly love, is right here.
I can't educate you to promote communism. I will never.
I'm educated enough to know when a conversation will lead nowhere. I mean, I guess that's the first step towards self-awareness. That was a highlight of arrogance and stupidity. It's okay to be arrogant if you're good and you're right and you're smart, and it's okay to be stupid if you're sincerely trying to get smarter, but it's not okay to be arrogant and stupid. That's a terrible combination. Ignorance and pride is a very, very powerfully toxic combination. I'm educated enough to know when a conversation's going to go nowhere. And that would pretty much be every conversation with you, young lady. But you're young, wearing the scarf and promoting communism, Lenin, very educated. Oh, very educated. But then the other highlight is right here. This one just.
Guys, learn, start. You have no idea what you're talking about. You cannot agree with, you cannot support anything with a political prisoner who was kidnapped by a regime.
Miss, with all due respect, I can do what I please.
Miss, with all due respect, I can do what I please, says the guy who's promoting authoritarian communism. Miss, I can do what I please because you live in a free and, in theory, democratic society, you raging buffoon of an idiot. This comes from Cat Canada _TM. My friend, Alessa Canada, I met her as well, who escaped communism hell in Venezuela, educates some clueless. Miss, I can do what I want. With all due respect, I can do as I please because you live in a free society, you dipshit. The very same free society that you're trying to destroy and ruin for other people with your communist tendencies. But that is the tactic of the commies. They will, buy the rope that they'll use to hang you. And then the problem with the capitalists is that they will sell the commies the rope with which to hang, that they will use to hang them. Now, all I have to say is I was going to go for a little bit longer with the intro, but I don't want to because I see Jake Lang is in the background. Jake Lang, I get a DM in Twitter, out of solitary. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm going live at 11:30. Can you pop on? Let's do it. Jake, I'm going to bring you in. Jake, I had him on, one of the Jan 6 prisoners. Stirred up some controversy that I didn't know would be stirred up by interviewing one of the January 6 political prisoners, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, I'm going to bring him in, and we'll see, because it was an interesting controversy that I wasn't expecting. 3, 2, 1. Let's see if this is working. Jake Searle, can you hear me?
Hey, Viva, can you hear me, brother? God bless you. Thank you so much for having me on, man. It's been such a trying time these last about 5-6 weeks.
So do tell us what happened, because I got notification that the day after or two after our interview, you were allegedly hauled into solitary, and then I got a couple of updates, but not directly from you, AWOL for however long it was. What the hell happened?
The administration here basically put a pincher move on me and my First Amendment rights, trying to shut me down from being able to do the fundraising and the interviews and the outreach, telling the truth about what's happening behind these prison walls to the January 6ers, the 1,500 political prisoners that have been targeted by the Joe Biden regime for protesting the stolen election on January 6th. And basically, being one of the more outspoken Jan 6ers, they have it out for me, and they hit me with a bunch of fabricated charges, which it took me 5 weeks to beat them all, and I beat all my institutional charges. And so out of, basically, it's a sensory deprivation chamber. It was the most abhorrent treatment I've ever had, and I've been in 15 different prisons, and I've done 800 days in solitary confinement. This 36 days that I just went through was almost enough to break the camel's back, but I had Christ with me in the cell, and I'm grateful that His grace was with me.
Well, just tell me, I mean, exactly how this happens. We do the interview, and then you go back to your cell, and what happens? A day and a half, 2 later, they come in and just say you're going. Like, how does that even work in reality?
Yeah, so what they do is this is the magical word in all prisons: safety and security of the institution. And so when they claim that you're a safety and security risk, they can basically drag you through any means of human deprivation of your rights, your civil liberties, and throw you in basically like a holding cell without access to a phone, without access to legal library, without access to courts, pencil, paper. It subverts everything. It is an absolute catch-all, so that they can take you and remove you from population and stick you basically in a dark corner and try to remove your voice. Like in my case, it happens to other prisoners sometimes for other reasons, but in my case is because of the political work that we're doing, and pushing for Donald Trump to be elected to pardon the January 6ers is a huge thing. Hundreds of thousands of voters, I believe, this year will be coming out who have never voted before, who are independents, who are sitting on the fence, and they'll say, because the January 6ers are being mistreated, I will vote for Donald Trump. And we're making that message loud and clear. And so this is coming down straight from the top. All the Gen 6ers that are making an impact, get them locked away in solitary confinement so we can continue to gag order basically Donald Trump and all of his main, supporters.
When they haul you off to solitary, first of all, you said sensory deprivation, and I've never thought of it like that. What was it? A lit room? How big is the room? What do you have in there? And how do you get in touch with your lawyer?
So just to measure everything I'm about to say, I'm not here to complain. We walk in the spirit of victory through Jesus Christ. And this is just to tell the truth to the American people, because I don't like to come off as a whiner or a complainer. I'm blessed beyond measure by God, and He was with me in the cell, and I have a great support system and amazing people on the outside. But that being said, these travesties of justice cannot go on without people speaking out against them. And so I'll give you guys the full rundown. Basically, they come, about 5 or 10 fully dressed up, geared officers come and run down on you in your cell. It's called a rundown. And they humiliate you. They dragged me out barefoot in my underwear in front of the whole unit. They strip searched me. They didn't find anything. They brought me upstairs to the 9th floor, which is the rooftop of the Brooklyn Federal Prison. And once I was up there, they put me in a cell with a known violent gang member who's here on a murder charge, who pled guilty to it. He actually ended up being a good human being, a repentful human being, and we got along. But I'm a political prisoner, and they're putting me in with, these extremist gang members. So me and this young man, we had to survive the first 2 weeks with one pair of boxers, 1 t-shirt, and 1 socks. No towel, no hygiene products, no envelopes, no pencils, no pieces of paper to write the courts. And you get out of your cell 2 hours per week. You're supposed to get out 1 hour per day, Monday to Friday, so 5 hours per week. But the guards basically laugh in your face, and you have to get like a good guard, a good CO, who will take you out of your cell. And when they take you out of your cell for your 1 hour per day, they bring you to a 15 by 10-foot bird cage on the rooftop of a prison. You can't see anything. You're surrounded by brick walls. Basically, the only thing that's open is the top of the cage is open, so you can get some sunlight. The other basic things that make it impossible to live there, this is the biggest travesty. A human being is only a human being if you can communicate to others. You're stuck in a cell with one other human being, but I count that as solitary confinement, because anything else, you're supposed to be able to communicate to hundreds of human beings or dozens or whatever. You're stuck in a cell with one person. It's basically solitary, but you don't have access to call your family. You don't have access to talk to your pastor, to talk to the media, to do any type of normal community, outreach. And so you don't have books. You don't have any form of entertainment. So you're basically in an 8 by 10 whitewashed cell, 170 hours per week. And you have no way to entertain yourself. They don't give you books. They don't give you legal library access. They don't give you anything. And so this is happening in the BOP. The Bureau of Prisons is so draconian, and it is so outdated. In other countries across the world, because you're here in the federal prison, you meet people from Slovenia, you meet people from Spain, you meet people from England. They do not treat their prisoners this way. America is the only country in the world that puts people in sensory deprivation chambers, holds them, like myself today, actually, Viva, is 40 months. I was kidnapped from my home in upstate New York by the FBI on January 16th, 2021. That was 40 months ago. I have been denied my 8th Amendment right to a reasonable bond, and I've been denied my 5th Amendment right, my 6th Amendment right to fair and speedy trial and to access to the courts for 40 months. And on top of that, I'm being stuck in solitary confinement for 800 days out of the roughly 1,200 I've been incarcerated. But I've never been in solitary confinement without having access to a phone once per day. This was the first time they stuck me in solitary where I was truly cut off from the entire world. I felt like I was in George Orwell's 1984 book where I was unpersoned, literally. I mean, they say it in the book, but if you're stuck in solitary confinement, you can't call home, you can't write your lawyer, you can't write your judge because they don't give you any materials, and you're just stuck there with no clothing, no books, no any way to entertain yourself. You are literally unpersoned. This is the furthest reach that they can try to take away all of your dignity. And if you do not know God in this situation, you have nothing. But if you have God, you have all things, and all things are possible through Christ Jesus who strengthens us.
Let me ask you this. You said you were in a cell with another person for the 30 some odd days?
Sometimes I was there alone. Sometimes I had a cellmate.
I'm not saying that to minimize the discomfort. That might actually enhance it. You're in a cell with someone who pleaded guilty to murder.
Yes. Execution style murder. God forbid. He's repented. We did Bible study every day, and he came to Christ, and he committed his life to the Lord. He's a good souled person. He was just a young gang member in New York City. All these young kids, they listen to this rap music, this drill rap. They get completely brainwashed, and they're doing things they would never do if they were alone. They're in this, wolf pack mentality. They feed off one another, and they do stupid things, and they ruin their whole lives. And this is one of those people that he's not a malicious, intended person, but, this is not something that you don't put a political prisoner in a locked cell for 3-4 weeks. He was my cellmate with a convicted murderer. I am a pretrial detainee. I have not been convicted of a single crime. Viva.
It is wild. I pulled up a comment. I don't know if you can see it, but someone said, like when they put Tommy Robinson in jail, they stuck him with inmates that, typically you'd think would want to kill him. Back in Canada, Arthur Pavlovsky, one of the pastors who got jailed for violating Alberta health protocol for COVID, was in his cell with a schizophrenic individual who had pens and pencils. And it's like, I'm convinced they do this so that something bad happens. So you were in there. When do you first get in touch with your attorney after they haul you off to this new cell?
Viva, give me 1 minute. I got to redial the phone. I have 15-minute phone calls here. I'll be back in just a minute or two, okay?
Okay, do it. Go for it.
Thank you. God bless.
I'm going to see if, do I remove, or I'm going to remove and then see if he comes back in. I don't want to kick from studio because I don't know if that's going to, let me leave it in here, just see when he comes back. It is sickening. What are the charges against Mr. Lang? This is where, people are going to say he committed acts of violence. There are charges of assault. Let me see. Let me just pull this up real quick. Jake Lang, assault charges, Jan 6. Capital rally planned in Brooklyn for New York man. This is from the River Reporter. Civil disorder, assaulting, resisting. Lang's prospects after January 6th. So just see this. Because I remember when I asked him, people were, who wanted to pick on the phraseology. When I asked him, he said, he had a bat at one point and used it to fend off police officers. Some people in the chat were saying, well, that you fight off officers who are assaulting you. Others said he had a bat. Get with you, FAFO. Fuck around, find out. And I said, first of all, when the Molotov cocktail lawyers are out on bond and then get, a year less a day or something, and Jake is in pretrial detention, there are some out there who hypothesize that Jake knows he's going to get convicted. So in pretrial, he'll get time and a half or 2 times whatever his time served is. This is all a travesty. It's all a travesty and an outrageous injustice. Even for those who did commit acts of violence. A, speedy trial. B, no withholding of exculpatory evidence. And C, the punishment should fit the crime. And if the summer of love taught us anything, well, it's that there's a propensity to tolerate acts of violence and destruction depending on the political orientation of them. I'll leave Jake up there and we can. So I heard that he got off to solitary. Oh, is he back on?
Hey, Viva, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Am I connected? Hey, brother, God bless. So talk to me. This is. I mean, I hope that your audience is listening, because this is tyranny working itself out in the modern day age. We're not against powdered wigs, and we don't go in front of King George and whatnot. But this is what tyranny looks like when it's actually physically present in America. Thousands of Jan 6ers being hunted down by the FBI, held for years without trial. Our cases are being literally brought up to the Supreme Court. 2 or 3 January 6 cases are now in front of the Supreme Court because the federal district court judges inside of Washington, D.C. are so corrupt and biased, and they're so prejudiced against Donald Trump and his supporters, that the Supreme Court is our only avenue of justice, that should not be the case. That is an extreme avenue of justice. They take 1 out of 1,000 cases. So the fact that they're having to step in and right the wrongs, which we should know in about 1 month from right now, the reason why I haven't been able to go to trial is because my case from the last year and a half has been pushed up to Supreme Court, the 1512 obstruction of Congress charge, 20-year maximum felony, 350 Jan 6ers have the charge, and Donald Trump has now been charged with it criminally. We are putting our hope and our faith in the Supreme Court of the United States of America to right this grievous injury that we've been suffering under and dismiss this charge for all of us.
Jake, look, when you came on the first time, I didn't realize there was going to be anything controversial about it. And I'm not going to out anybody who sent me DMs and said, watch out and ask this and ask that. I don't know why it is that you in particular seem to be garnering some controversy as relates to the January 6th. Do you know why? I mean, is there any rational explanation that I might be missing as to why you in particular seem to be garnering controversy among a side that should be unified behind the January 6th persecution?
Well, first of all, the mass majority of the January 6th camp is extremely unified. There is obviously a few disruptors and dissenters, as there isn't any large movement like this. But second of all, the reason why I believe a lot of the heat comes down on me is because I've kind of come out as the organizational leader from the inside of the prisons. We run the largest fundraising organization of the Jan Sixers. And when you're fundraising money, obviously money creates issues between people, and there is all kinds of strife that gets, gelled up when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars that are raised. And we're very forthright with all of our fundraising. We put out transparency reports 3 or 4 times now on the Gateway Pundit, and before I was locked up in solitary confinement, we just put out our new one that actually showed that we had donated $15,000 more than we'd raised on our J6 legal fund. A new transparency report, over $550,000 have been distributed just from that one fund alone. We do commissary, we do emergency family funds, we do book funds, and all types of other fundraising. But that is obviously by and far the main reason. And then the second one is that I do a lot of I'm very outspoken. I do a lot of the interviews for the community. As far as when people, think about January 6th prisoners and stuff, they have, a handful of guys that have really just decided, no matter what the consequences are in the courtroom for being outspoken, which they are slamming the ones who are relentlessly speaking the truth way harder than they're slamming the guys. They're giving basically kid glove treatments to the guys who take the plea deals, unfortunately, and they don't say anything, and they just go silently into the night. And then they're taking, the hardest and most heavy-handed approach to the guys like myself who will not refuse to take a plea deal and keep on calling out the corruption and the miscarriages of justice that we're suffering under. So for those 2 reasons, the fundraising and the media, it's kind of, I've turned into, like a very polarizing figure, both for the leftists and for the conservatives who want to toe the line. And I also kind of went, full out 1776 on January 6th. So maybe those 3 reasons put together, and you've got yourself a controversial figure.
When you, how long into your solitary were you able to contact your attorney, and what did they do to get you out? And is there any remedy, or is it even deemed improper what they did to you, or is it just par for the course?
So I was blessed. I was able to have legal calls set up. Sometimes they brought me, sometimes they didn't. My lawyers, the biggest thing that we did was we filed a 40-page, if you look through my Twitter feed, I think my team was able to post it a few days ago. We filed a 40-page lawsuit, a habeas corpus, one of the most serious lawsuits you can, on Merrick Garland, the DOJ, and the warden of the Brooklyn prison where I'm being held, cataloging over 40 months of my torture from all the different prisons and all the different places I've been denied my constitutional rights and been mistreated. And so that was a huge, attack that we launched, basically a counterattack to their trying to just unperson me. And on top of that, my father and Coy Griffin, the founder of Cowboys for Trump, and about a dozen or 2 more patriots came outside of the Brooklyn Federal Prison, and Coy Griffin drove from Arizona with his horse Red, and they did a horseback protest outside the Brooklyn Federal Prison last Wednesday, and it brought the facility to its knees. They had to lock down the facility. All of the main lieutenants and captains and the brass had to be outside and present. There was over 100 police officers outside and COs. And so through protesting and, exercising our God-given rights to, sue and to speak our minds and stuff, basically they had to relinquish me. On top of that, their allegations of institutional infractions, which involved my First Amendment rights, were unfounded. I beat all of the charges, and so they basically couldn't hold me up there, even though they really wanted to. I'm sure their handlers at the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office that have been, pining to shut me up for a long time and destroy the fundraising that we do. I'm sure that they were, very opposed to getting me back out where I have access to the phones like I do now. But we prevailed in the name of Jesus, and no weapon formed against us shall prosper, brother.
I can't imagine what it's like just to be in that. Is it a lit cell, and is it lit 24/7? Does it have a window or a slot to go outside? Is there a toilet in it? Like what does it even look like in there?
So imagine you're being interrogated 19 to 20 hours a day by a huge fluorescent light just looming over you. And the only time you can get it turned off is when you get a guard that's willing to listen to you around 1 or 2 in the morning. They'll finally, you have to beg them. Every time they do a round, every 30 minutes to an hour, say, hey, turn off my light, please, after 10 p.m. And they don't listen to you. They're very aloof. That one of the hardest parts about being in the SHU, which is called the SHU, the Special Housing Unit, solitary confinement, is the indecency and the just lack of compassion that the guards have. And if you need toilet paper, they don't give it to you. If you need a toothbrush, they don't give it to you. If you need a towel, it's like they don't care. They just have just this heartlessness to them, and including turning off your light when it's supposed to be turned off at 10 p.m. So you're in a cell with a fluorescent light beaming on you 20 hours a day, and it's an 8x10 cell with whitewashed stark walls, and you have just a singular desk and bench to sit on with nothing to do, nothing to write, nothing to read. And you've got a metal stainless steel rusty toilet that smells, that hasn't been cleaned in God knows how long, inches from you when you sleep. And you've got a 2-inch thick little yoga mat basically for a mattress on a steel bunk bed. And that's your Ritz Carlton for a month and a half, like I had to go through. And it's in those times where you're completely stripped of all comforts and human niceties that you really understand that if you have a spiritual relationship with God, that even those things that you consider to be absolutely vital when you're outside in the real world, you can live off 1 bar of soap, a toothbrush, and a roll of toilet paper, which is all they give you, for weeks at a time, and 1 t-shirt and a pair of underwear and a pair of socks for weeks at a time, and still remain joyful and confident of God's deliverance power and maintaining your positive attitude if you have God, if you know Christ. Because if you don't, you really, there are screams and pealing screams of inmates losing their mental grip on reality all night because of the treatment that they're having, and then they don't have that firm foundation, a spiritual relationship with God. And that's probably the most devastating part about being up there, knowing that there's so many hurting souls up there that have been abandoned by our society and completely treated worse than animals. Even your dog gets walked once a day, and you can't do anything to help them. I tried. I did my Bible studies through the cell. They're very thin walls. And so I had 2 inmates to the left of me and 2 inmates to the right of me, and my bunkmate. Every single day we were praying and doing long Bible studies together. I know most of the parables of our Lord and Savior Jesus offhand. And so we were able to share the love of God and be together in fellowship. Even though I couldn't see them, we heard each other's voices. But this is the trying times, that as our founding father said, these are the times that try men's souls. And I believe that this is the type of situations that the government puts political prisoners through, but it actually crafts us and molds us and refines us to be the same men of character, strength, and integrity that can actually take down this evil oligarchical, New World Order system. In the end game, they've created their worst enemy, strong men who receive the love of God no matter what the circumstances are. And so I'm grateful that God puts me and trusts me in these situations and tests my faith so that I can become stronger and closer to Him. And I don't have any complaints other than this is horrible what they're doing, and people need to know about it. But we're not here to complain. We're victors, and we're not victims.
If people wanted to complain, or they want to raise your plight and the plight of the other Jan 6ers, do they write to the board of whatever they call it, what's it called, the CB? Where do they write? Who can they contact, and how can they reach you?
Well, there are many different, obviously, government oversights that are supposed to be in place. They have, congressional oversight committees, judicial oversight committees. The judges are really to be blamed for this because they're allowing this to happen underneath their noses. And so there are, if you guys just Google it, I'm sure the Congressional Judicial Oversight Committee, one of the biggest pushes that I'm personally pushing for right now is impeachments and disbarrings of the federal prosecutors and federal judges that are allowing these human rights travesties to happen underneath their noses solely because they're January 6th political prisoners. It is not because of, they're targeting us. And this is happening at a much higher rate. A lot of the inmates, God forbid, in the SHU are there for violent outbursts that they've done. They may have stabbed another inmate. They may have attacked a guard. And I'm not saying they deserve to be thrown in solitary confinement, but the reason that we're being tortured is a different reason. We're pretrial detainees. We're peaceful protesters. Some of us, like myself, had to defend our lives at the Capitol from tyrannical police brutality, but we're not in the same class as your common law criminals that injured or hurt another citizen. We did what we did because we were called by God to stand to defend our constitutional republic, and for them to treat us as bad, if not 10 times worse than these other prisoners in many circumstances, is really the reason why I'm calling for the judges and the prosecutors to be impeached, because this is one of your protected federal classes, right? Your gender, sexual orientation, age. You're not supposed to be discriminated or treated differently based upon these different classes. And one of them is political affiliation. And so we are being treated differently and harassed and detained and revoked our bond and given extreme over sentencing because we are conservative Christian Trump supporters. And for that reason, it's like if modern day somebody was giving out greater punishment or worse conditions of confinement because somebody was a Mexican or a black person, and the judges were allowing that to happen and even citing that from the bench. If you go and Google different political statements that these judges have made on the January 6th sentencing and in their trials and stuff like that, they're telling them in many cases that you're not a political prisoner. You were duped by Donald Trump, and you're getting what you deserve. And if it was up to me, I'd put you away for much longer. But the federal guidelines are XYZ. So these judges are making purely political based moves and judgments from the bench, and they all need to go. God forbid we need a real clearinghouse. There's only a very few handful of conservative judges that are appointed by Trump and Reagan, some of them, that have any basis in law and order left, and that are not just completely complicit and beholden to the Democrat stranglehold in our judicial system right now. They need to go. We need a clearinghouse of the DOJ and our judicial system.
Now, you're waiting on the outcome of the Fisher immunity argument as much as everybody else. What do you have?
So
next?
Fisher, those are two different arguments. Fisher is 1512. Immunity is solely for Donald Trump.
I'm sorry. You're right. Fisher was the void for vagueness or the constitutionality of the obstruction charge, and immunity is for Trump. Sorry, my bad. What do you have next? What's your next hearing date? And how can people reach you in prison or in jail?
So my next hearing date is actually next week. We have an emergency bond motion that we refiled as well. That's another thing my legal team did while I was in solitary confinement. And this will be my third time going in front of Judge Carl Nichols, a Trump appointee. I have no criminal record myself. I'm not a violent person. I defended lives. I'm credited with saving 2 people's lives at the Capitol that day. He should see the scope of my person who I am, and he should release me on bond, but he has denied me twice in the past. So next week I have a bond motion. In June sometime we should be hearing from the Supreme Court and have like a huge end of the movie scene, Friday Night's Light, where many hundreds of Jan 6ers are released from prison because a lot of us are being held solely based upon the conviction of that felony, 20-year felony charge, 1512, obstruction of Congress. So we should be seeing a huge relief there from Supreme Court. And then in September 9th, 2024, I will actually 1,400 days after I was arrested, I will have my chance to prove my innocence, God forbid, in the most biased jury pool of all time. Basically, bringing a January 6th defendant in front of a Washington, D.C. jury pool is like bringing, let's say, one of the 9/11 terrorists survived the plane crash, bringing one of the 9/11 terrorists in front of a New York City jury pool. It's basically the same thing with the brainwashing that the media has done against Jan Sixers and the J6 Select Committee did against us. We have no chance at a fair trial. Actually, the conviction rate for felony trials of January Sixers is 100%, which is almost like statistically impossible because we've had like 150 trials. So, it's not even in outlier margins. It's 0%, 0 wins on felony trials in DC. So I will be going and making a moral stand, a principled stand on September 9th, 2024, saying that I believe what I did was right in the eyes of God and that our founding fathers would have done the same thing if they were brought in front of the Capitol that day to stand for our constitutional republic against a stolen election. So that's the next big date. And I'd love to have a great outpouring of support and supporters there for my trial in September. So if you guys want to get plugged into everything I'm doing, obviously my Twitter account is a great place to stay in touch at Jake Lang J6. My team is updating that constantly. And if you want to write me, and more importantly, write all my Jan 6 brothers and sisters in prison, go to patriotmailproject.com. It's a long list of hundreds of us incarcerated and the information on how you can write them and send them prayers, put some money in their commissary books if you guys want a centralized place
Jake,
to put money.
Give me the name again. I'm going to share the link right now.
Yes, patriotmailproject.com. It started actually with the Bundy political prisoners back in the day with Pete Santilli and them when they were incarcerated for 600, 700 days. That's when it was started, and now it's unfortunately had to evolve to help out the Jan Sixers. So please go to Patriot Mail Project to write me and all of the Jan Sixers. My name is Edward Jacob Lang, legally, not Jake Lang, so you'll find me there. And if you guys want to donate to the commissary fund for the Jan Sixers in one centralized place, we send out $25,000 a month to the Jan Sixers on commissary through sponsorj6.com. That's an invaluable resource that I manage and personally oversee to make sure that it's all on the up and up. So that's a great place to go to if you want to just sign up for $20 a month or $50 a month, whatever you can afford. Sponsorj6.com, the letter J, the number 6. Sponsorj6.com.
Jake, will you be able to come back on periodically and let us know how everything's going and how things are progressing?
Of course, Viva, it would be my honor. You have a great platform. Your audience is full of patriots and clear-minded people, and that's a rarity. And so I really enjoyed being on here, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I pray that God blesses you and this 2024 endeavor to save our country. Keep praying, guys.
All
There's
right,
power in prayer.
Thank you very much. Stay in touch, and we'll keep putting this on blast.
Thank you. God bless.
Have a good day.
God bless you.
Thank you. All right, everybody, that's Jake Lang. I'm going to go sign up right now. Did I know? I think I signed up already. I'm going to double check that I didn't. So that's Jake Lang out of solitary. Holy hell. I'm going to give everybody the link to Rumble because that's where we're going to be going now. I'm going to give everybody the link to Locals if you want to bypass Rumble and just come straight over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. My brother is in the backdrop. Every time he comes on screen, his hair looks grayer and grayer. Hold on. I'll bring him on here so he can introduce himself to everybody, including YouTube. Then we're going to run on over to the free speech platform Rumble. And that is it. Dan, 3, 2, 1. Sir.
Oh, bro, it is getting whiter. Look at that.
It's the light. It's the lighting because put your head up close here.
Respect your elders.
My
Demand
goodness.
respect. Was that rosacea?
That's the rosacea, maybe a little echinacea.
Free skincare products from your supporters. That's what I need.
Let me see something here. Your facial hair is also gray, but coming in nice and even. I like it. You go from salt and pepper to salt, baby.
That was intense, man. Holy cow.
It's outrageous because
intense.
we did the interview, and then I get a message, or I see it on Twitter that they said, "Hey, Viva, Jake has been thrown into solitary," and like I have to go check my DMs. And like, yeah, he was in there and a month. But can you imagine? Like, they say, Sartre said, "Hell is other people. Solitary is torture." But when you're two people being solitarily tortured in the same unit, like, I don't know how, someone doesn't have a night terror and just, destroy the other person in their cell.
It's funny. I just posted about this yesterday. I didn't realize Canada got in trouble for flouting, for being offside in a lot of their prison conditions. Not just the conditions, but the solitary in particular. It's a recognized form of torture. Some people may demand it in certain situations because it's like you talk about safety, but yeah, extensive use of that kind of modality. Holy cow!
No,
and then very interesting to hear first of all how he survived, and this is important for people to know because anybody can be thrown. Like we're getting to the point where anybody can be wrongfully tossed into conditions that. So having that spiritual mission, his purpose, like that was very important in terms of, and I've read about this in other survival books, but you have to have that spiritual foundation before you get tossed in. So good on him.
I'm reluctant to say this because I'm not trying to be glib or make a joke. There's no but. Ordinarily in society, if people talk to God in their heads, that's a sign of, people ask questions. If you're in a prison cell and you're not in your head talking to God, you're going to dissociate from your own body. And so it's a fascinating thing. Like I don't know how people literally don't go into some form of psychotic dissociation from their body. Where the hell am I? I have no idea what day it is, what time it is, and I don't exist. Do I even exist? And how he's able to do it? It's like
I was talking to a correctional officer about them, like or a former. How do they do it? What do the strong ones do? Routine. Some of them spend a lot of time cleaning the unit, cleaning their space, right? At least they have, and then some of them are able to exercise. But yeah, when they're alone, and that just really changes the whole. And the lights can't go up, man. That sounds like holy hell.
It's torture. It's just outright torture.
But I also liked his recommendation on how to solve it, because I did like his idea of like to advise the Crown prosecutor, in our case the Crown prosecutors, but the prosecutors there and the judges, that some of these conditions may be violating international law. And so if you let those judges and those lawyers know, like personally, that what they're doing, they're, could put them offside international law, like that would be good to get on the record and see what, see where that goes. But anyhow.
Dan, I think we have, I don't know if you're prepared to talk about it. I have to at least do it here before we go over to Rumble, because that was the thumbnail on YouTube and Rumble and Locals. Have you followed the assassination attempt on, do they pronounce it Fico or it's not Fico, but.
I mean, look, you don't want to speculate, like give legs to an idea there that may not, it's obviously disconcerting, especially because what's his name? The head of the WHO has his own serious issues there with, I think there's something filed against him in the criminal court. Who
the head of the WHO is not that
Tedros?
Okay, the guy who, I'm not sure if it's a real meme, but there's a video of him like at a gay bar, and I don't know if it's real or not, but no, it's like the timing is suspicious. I've watched the video now. There's a few of them you can find on Twitter, and I don't think I want to play it because it's not graphic. It's upsetting when you know what you're looking at. I've watched the video multiple times. I watched redacted news analysis yesterday. This is like 4 days after. Is it Fisco or Fizzo? Fizzo, thank you. This is 4 days after Fizzo basically blasts the WHO. He's a populist candidate. I don't know if he's called the Trump of Slovakia, and I don't know if Shinzo Abe was considered the Trump of Japan, but I mean, I've seen all the theorizing, and you've seen the coincidences, and you see the piecing the dots together. The alleged assailant, I mean, alleged, it's on video and they captured him, is a lefty lunatic.
Oh, he is. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's I believe that's been confirmed, and I've confirmed it at different sources than merely one. Like an activist, a lefty loon activist. And you got this guy.
The WHO was using language on their Twitter account. I called them out on it. They were comparing. They used like and people on both sides use this language about when they call like the cancerous, like the failure
a scourge on the universe, or
something
a threat
like
to,
that.
Right? They paint people as existential threats. It's what they're doing with Trump right now, and it is the dog whistle that they accuse everybody else of. But you depict everybody, especially the populists, as existential threats. You know what some nutbag lefty activist, or it could be a righty act, could be whomever. You know that someone's going to do something. How in watching the video over and over again, people were saying they heard 4 shots. I heard 5 shots, and I listened a lot. But like, it seems that the security response, I wouldn't say is like suspiciously let it happen. It's just like incompetence, and it happens relatively fast. And then like nobody even knows what happened, and then dude's in the hospital, apparently expected to survive, got shot in the stomach.
Oh, he's good.
And,
Okay.
the latest as of this morning is he's expected to survive. But
I mean, when they keep using this language of the crisis, and keep building this disease X and keeping people in a state of constant panic, it doesn't help. And so, yeah, you think that joining this treaty is going to be the ultimate savior for humanity. It makes people really concerned. If we don't join the treaty, then we're doomed.
Well, yeah, it's like we'll talk about that before we segue into over on Rumble. But the WHO treaty, like this is like the existential threat to humanity for anybody who doesn't want to be a part of it. It's like not wearing the mask. You become the super spreader that kills everybody else. So it's not just your decision impacting yourself, it's impacting humanity. And you can get people to, believe idiocy, believe lunacy, and then carry out atrocities. The WHO, this is the Global Pandemic Treaty. Barnes and I have talked about it repeatedly. I mean, but in law, unless they try to circumvent national law through executive order or just, de facto corporate control, the proposal of the WHO global pandemic is basically to have a one world order, world government response to a pandemic. Usurp the rights of nations to the global order.
So that was kind of the counter, which is that this is an attack on sovereignty. And at the end of the day, I don't know, like in there's no teeth really that can, there's no armed force that can ensure that signatories are doing their end of the bargain and following the treaty. So there's nothing to really enforce the commitment to the treaty. So I don't like when they say it's an attack on sovereignty, it's more like it's an agreement for sovereign nations to relinquish certain decision making or to at least pass the buck on responsibility, which is what we saw during the pandemic. So I know exactly how it's going to go, like how they're going to play it and use it, right? Because at the end of the day, I think the only enforcement provision in there was like, we can get into it later, but
no, get into it now. Do.
Well, I think it's article. I took a note here, Article 25 or something, where it talks about what happens if one party feels like another party's not doing their bit. It's mediation, arbitration. Like they'll just diplomacy. They'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
So two things. First of all, this, and you'll see if you concur with Barnes and my and Barnes' assessment, but it's mostly Barnes. This needs to be ratified at the national level under treaty law. So unless Canada ratifies this at the national level, unless the U.S. does it at the national level, in theory, it won't have any national legislative or legal value, enforcement value. The problem is, maybe my not so original thought is, if they get corporations to comply with the provisions, well, then you don't even need sort of legal enforcement. If, for example, they require vaccinations, passport, whatever, proof of vaccination, and corporations enforce that and not the government, in which case you're stuck in America. And so good for you, the treaty doesn't apply, but you can't fly overseas anymore, or you can't do certain things that require a certain international collaboration under this treaty. So there's a de facto application, and then there's the legal one, and they can get to the former without necessarily going through the latter.
But that's exactly it. It's we talked during the pandemic about opinion laundering, where people just kind of they put through medical opinions that aren't really theirs, but that they had some credibility, and they pushed these medical opinions forward without really taking. Here with this treaty, I think this is going to lead to responsibility laundering. Meaning what the companies are going to do, to your point, they're going to say, well, there's this treaty that is out there and we want to comply with the treaty. Mm-hmm. Municipalities will do the same thing. We're like pursuant to the World Health and it sounds all official and cool, and we're going to comply with this treaty. And so they pass the buck on responsibility. It's not our fault. It's not our, we're not doing this.
No, and they all have the same sort of vested interest in it because it'll result in, I'm trying to think of more corporate compliance or. Yeah, responsibility laundering.
Information, right? Information sharing. So under the treaty, there's a responsibility to share information about contact tracing and on an international level. But then
do you remember during the pandemic when they tried to trace who got you sick and they thought they could do it and they wanted to know where you were, who you saw, so that they could go notify the people that you were in contact with, so that you would have to then quarantine because it's almost like insanity that it ever happened and people forgot and now seem to want to be implementing it on a global scale.
Right. That's where the kids were locked in their rooms for 10, 14 days in Quebec because 3 chains of removal from someone who had possibly develop symptoms, turned out to be allergies, right? Like, exactly. And it's all going to be under the guise of, oh, well, we're just following the treaty. So the other side of the coin is like, look, we flout treaties all the time. So, okay, we'll sign it. Sure. We'll just flout it and go, try to enforce it. You can't. So maybe that's, the other positive side.
It's like the Paris Treaty is voluntary, and yet Trudeau's going to cripple and sink Canada to voluntarily comply with it, whereas China, not so much.
Right. I can see it now, where he gets up there and he's like, we've now signed the new treaty for the pandemic treaty, and we take our responsibilities very seriously and so effective. I know exactly how they're going to play it, and it's.
But so the bottom line is, it's not going to change much from a legal perspective unless it gets ratified at a national level. It doesn't become national law, but there's just going to be a de facto application because corporations are going to willingly submit to it. And this is how fascism actually works. Corporations working with government to basically impose a one world order. Is it a new world order? One world government.
I think they hold on. There's a term like that they actually use. I think it's called One Health or something, and they don't even. It doesn't even.
And they're not hiding it anymore.
So right. So the treaty refers to other documents, other agreements that could be subject to change through a different process. I don't know. So in other words, you're kind of signing something that ties to something else, and that could change. So it's like, it's a bit of a and
it's you're too polite. It's a clusterfuck, and what it is in fact the creeping fascism, and they want control over everybody, micromanaging. They want to lock you on islands and make you give a QR code to get off. But don't worry, that was only for what do they call it? A tourist tax. And now it's for compliance with the what is it called?
They're ahead of the curve on the treaty compliance.
Oh, treaty. What's the treaty called again? The Global Pandemic Treaty. What's the title?
Good question.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm trying to pull up the some videos here that I realized when you bookmark Twitter on your phone, it doesn't bookmark on your computer. So wasted a lot
What's
of
it
time.
called? Revised draft WHO Pandemic Agreement.
The WHO Pandemic Agreement. It's called the WHO Pandemic Agreement. WHO Pandemic Agreement. The WP. Get closer to the screen, Dan. I don't think we can see. All right, now I'm ending on YouTube. Come on over to Rumble, everybody. The link is there, and this doesn't affect us, Dan. Ending on YouTube or vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Hold on. Before I do anything, because I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. I forget to promote my own stuff, our own stuff. Everybody, we have merch. I forget to mention this. This is me back in the day when the fro was the fro. That's my wife. We've got merch at Viva Fry. I think we could probably get rid of the Christmas stuff. I should probably update this soon. But the best thing we've ever had on the merch site. This is it right here, people. Wanted for President, mugshot shirt, mugshot shot, and stay tuned because members of our locals community know what's coming down the pike there. There's some good stuff in the works. And if anybody wants to join our community, you can be a member, which is non-monetarily committing. Or you can be a supporter, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. It's $10 a month or $100 a year if you get the whole thing. Or you could just get coins and tips and do whatever. vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Rumble, the free speech platform. Here we comes off on CommuTube.